I'm Celine Williams, and welcome to the Leading Through Crisis podcast, a conversation series exploring resiliency and leadership in challenging times. My guest today is Dr. Beverly Kaye, who is recognized as one of the most knowledgeable professionals in career development, employee engagement, and retention. In 2018, she received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association for Talent Development. Beverly's books include Love 'Em or Lose 'Em, and Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go, and Up Is Not the Only Way. Thank you for joining me today.
You are welcome.
I'm very excited for this conversation. I love the names of your books. Just going to acknowledge that right up front. All very fun titles. I'm excited to talk to you about all of the things. So, the place where I usually like to start in these conversations is to ask the, big, broad question, and that is, when you hear the title of this podcast, Leading Through Crisis, the concept of leading through crisis or leading through challenging times, what comes up for you? What does that mean for you, if anything?
I think immediately for me, for the work I do, it is a talent crisis like we have never seen. Now, I'll bet at every point of talent crises, and there have been many, someone says that, but here we are with job hopping and retention and not enough talent to go around and new skill development. So if ever there's been a need for leaders to get their arms around their talent and let their talent know they are precious, I think it's now. And talent needs to hear that from their managers.
So I love this because I feel like this conversation comes up in so much of the work that I do with leaders around, it's a job seekers market right now, which means that which means that they are losing people and struggling to hire. So it's both sides of it, right? They are struggling with retention because of other job options or offers or whatever, and struggling to hire because there's so much out there. So
Absolutely.
I'm curious. I mean, I have 1,000 questions inside of this, but I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you see some of the trends are, or why this might be happening, or what's happening inside this bigger picture of retention and the challenges with retention and the challenges with bringing people on, because I think that's important for leadership to be aware of as well.
Right. There's so much. On the last piece of your sentence, bringing people on.
Yeah.
I think it's a whole new world now in bringing people on, because on means I might want you for a particular position, but I also want you to stay in our organization.
Mm.
Let us put our arms around you so that before you leave for the competition, you realize that there are many opportunities right here, right now. So managers have to learn that, and employees have to learn that. And I'm not sure either group is as aware of what lies within these boundaries.
Mm.
So the career piece is one thing that's pushing this. The other is that now there are so many choices that the grass looks greener there. And sometimes I don't even look there to see, is it greener grass or AstroTurf?
Yeah.
And I leave too soon. And in my research, I talk about the Pied Piper effect. Like one goes, others follow. And nowadays, I'm jumping all over. Nowadays,
I love it.
I talk to managers about how are you saying goodbye to those you lose? Are you saying goodbye with an invitation? Call me if it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
My door is open. I want to hear from you. Or are you saying, okay, lost that one, next? So there's so much change in people's mindsets. And maybe it isn't just skill set, it's mindset as well. I just wrote an article for a journal about attitude and aptitude and how important attitude is to give me more openings. Um, so it's a circus sometimes, three ring,
Yeah.
um, and you've got to keep your eye on the ball.
Yeah. So there's a lot in that that I love. I love this idea. Like, truthfully, I love this idea of it's not just skill set, it's mindset. I think that that is super important. Same with attitude and aptitude. I think that, I think those concepts are really important for us to keep in mind. And one of the things that came up for me when you were saying it's like, how are you saying goodbye to people as they leave their company? And I'd love your perspective on this. I talk to leaders and I talk about, this is not a me thing. I did not come up with this, but I often am advocating for this idea of offboarding. Just like we onboard people, how are we offboarding them? How are we leaving that door open, leaving them with a positive experience, even if they do decide to leave, whether it's voluntarily or not, we can make this a positive experience. We Change does not have to be this horrible, burn all the bridges, throw everything, throw the
Absolutely.
baby out with the bathwater, right?
Absolutely.
So
And now the research on boomerangs is growing, and smart companies reach out, and smart companies say, how are you doing? And in the book Up Is Not the Only Way, one of the six moves I talk about is called relocation. And the truth is, people are going to leave
mhm.
despite the opportunities. And it's how you say goodbye. It's how you say goodbye that gets you a respectful return. And you want that. And you want to, I know there's so much on everybody's plate, but you want to care about your alumni because they are great spokespeople for for your organization if you've treated them right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I very obviously agree with that. And it's funny because it's one of the things that I often say when I talk about creating like leadership development, right? Is that if you are encouraging, empowering, whatever, leaders and people to be leaders and they leave, then they are your biggest advocates out of they don't have to work for your company to send people to your company. If
Right.
they're telling other people, they're advocating for how great their experience was and look at all that they learned, and that when they had this great opportunity somewhere else that just wasn't available inside your company in the moment, and you like gave them the platform to go fly there and explore that opportunity, they're now going to advocate for you to the ends of the earth.
Right.
And
You know, I'm writing ideas down for other articles as we talk. One a chapter in Up Is Not, it suggests you leave the key under the mat. And the image is a welcome mat, a door, and is the key there? And that's something managers have to think about. And I should write an article with that title and use that material.
absolutely, I think it's a concept that traditionally, I'm not saying people don't, but traditionally, that's not how we think of leaving a job.
Right, right. And I talk about an elegant exit to get you a respectful return. So I guess I'm in love with words. And if I can figure out a word combo that sticks in people's minds, like for a leader, was that an elegant exit?
Yeah.
Or did I say goodbye?
Yeah.
And in the old days, we'd lock the door.
100%. Escort people
Right,
out. You'd
right,
escort
right.
people out.
And it was you traitor, you left.
Yep.
And now it is, we're sorry you left. I'll reboard you any day.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm curious from your perspective and maybe your research, maybe your experience, whatever it is, but what is holding people back? What is holding leaders back, but also people who leave from having that elegant exit? Like what are sort of the things that prevent that from happening?
I think they're all understandable. On the manager side, I am up to here in a way I have not been up to here in the past.
Right.
So I'm doing an exit interview. Let me just get this done. Let me just fill out the forms. And there's plenty of talent out there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you have that attitude, there's plenty of talent out there. People sniff it, smell it, feel it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of managers have that attitude. You know, I remember one case study about a manager who said when someone left, well, no big deal, plenty of talent out there. The word got out around this one employee that everybody in the department loved,
Mm,
and three people left because of that sentence that said, I don't value X.
yeah.
So I think one part of it is we're in a rush like never before. Let's just get this done. The other is as a manager, I don't think of someone may be coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't say the right words, you know, and the individual needs to say the right words about their exit also.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll share one more exit story in Love 'Em or Lose 'Em. The book is written according to the alphabet, A through Z, as you would say. And we collected a ton of data about why people leave. And then we read exit interviews and of people who left. We followed the person to the next job and we said, we see what you wrote here. Why did you really leave? And they said, I left because my boss was a jerk in so many ways and I couldn't stand it anymore. So J in the alphabet in the book is for jerk. Are you one?
Yeah.
And we collected 55 jerkatudinal characteristics that people actually said. And it's like those are the real reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So is the organization coaching or canning those jerks? And often, if the jerk manager brings in dollars, then I don't want to coach them or can them. Let
Yeah.
them just keep doing it.
Yeah.
So, all those reasons.
So what you just said brings something really specific to mind. I do a lot of work in culture, and I often say, and I didn't coin this, I just don't remember who spoke about it first, but I often repeat the thing that I heard, which was this idea that your culture is basically your culture can be summed up in the worst behavior that you allow to continue in your culture.
That's great. That's
And
great.
and what what that list, and I'm totally going to have to look at the list of the jerkatudinal behaviors, because when you have someone that you are neither coaching nor canning, you are basically saying this is the behavior we are accepting as our baseline of culture, as our baseline across the board. And there's there's no reason for someone, when they have options, and there's always options, to continue to work for another person who behaves that way,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you know, to me this ties so directly into people's experience of culture, and if they see it in one person, they're going to expect it in other people, and that is a ripple effect in your organization, whatever size it is.
Right, right. And your statement reminds me of the big emphasis now on employee well being. And in my own research, because the W chapter in Love 'Em is for wellness, um, employee well being a lot depends on the manager. I mean, the data out there in the health field is saying managers make people sick. And I don't think any manager wakes up and says, how could I make my people sick today?
Yep.
But in our own rush, in our own pile of stuff to do, we often say things or don't say things that like are like a knife in the heart
Yeah.
of a great person.
Yeah. I think that's really heartbreaking to hear that managers make people sick, and it's also not surprising, right?
Right.
What we know of how much of our health comes from stress or comes from, you know, I'm going to say stress again because I can't, emotional labor, whatever the case may be. If you're in a situation where a lot of that feels like, whether it is true or not, but feels like it's coming from your boss, then of course your manager is going to be contributing significantly to your
Right.
experience of wellness or lack thereof.
Right. Right. And it's not like there's a course you have to take and study and memorize. It's, be nice. uh, I remember Love 'Em is 20 years old. And when it first came out, I was giving a speech somewhere, and a high level manager was greeting his 100 people and introduced me by saying, everything Beverly's going to tell you, you already know. And I thought, I'm going to die. And then he said, because your mother taught it to you when she said, play nice in the sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, it's right.
Yeah.
So it's the knowing doing gap
Yeah.
that is the issue.
Yeah.
Um, I know it, like, of course I know it, but do I do it? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know.
And I think that kindness is a place where we often know the experience of kindness and we know we should be kind. And the minute our emotions get the better of us, for a lot of people, that goes out the window. And you're like, I can't be kind. I can only protect me and whatever that looks like. And that to me, and I'd love your perspective on it, but that's where that knowing doing gap show I see it the most.
Right, right, right. And kindness, again, it's like we grew up having that message,
Yeah.
and we need reminders. Um, just like one of my specialties is the world of career development, and we often will ask leaders, "Are you developing your people?"
Mm,
And they say yes, yes, yes. And then we ask the person, "Are you being developed?" No, no, no. And part of it is you're always being developed. It's that no one says that was good development. Did you get it?
right.
That's why you got that assignment. And bosses don't remember to say that either.
Yeah.
One time in a session I gave people little flags that said that was development to wave when managers did it, like, "Oh, that was development."
Yeah.
'Cause whoosh, it goes right by us.
Yeah. Uh, and I think especially in organizations that have a lot of coaching conversations, coaching type things built in, it's very easy to become blind to just how much development is actually happening because it starts to become part and parcel of the culture, which by the way is amazing. I fully encourage, I don't want to, but it does mean that unless it's a formal development situation, people don't even think of things as development anymore.
Right, right. And the individual translates development as either taking a course or moving out of where I am into something else.
Yeah.
And we forget that a big part of what I've always talked about development is job enrichment. It's an old, ancient word, but it means grow where you are. And if you don't have the grow where you are attitude as an individual, like shame on you.
Yeah. So, can you, I love the language of job enrichment, by the way, and this idea of grow where you are. Can you tell me a little bit about what that could mean or could look like for someone to, whether it's they're thinking, oh, I don't know if I do that, or how could I work on that, or what is that exactly?
So, for the individual who says there's nowhere to move in this organization and
Yeah.
refuses to look, the easiest question could be, and I ask it sometimes for fun, like if you were given a sabbatical, which people don't give lately, to study anything you want that would grow you right where you are and prep you for one of several future moves, what would you study? Sabbatical, you can go do it. It gets people to think about, well, what's my next learning adventure?
Yeah.
Because that's a big part of, growing where you are. What do you need to learn for this job as well as for others?
Hmm.
And another big part is, what could I teach someone else? Because in teaching, for many of us, we get a thrill. So, what is it? Maybe an exchange with a peer. Show me how you do those graphics, and I'll show you how I do that, whatever computer
Hmm.
piece thing.
Yep.
Um, so it's all of that. That how do you make things simple? And maybe that's what my calling has been all these years. Because all my books, you mentioned the titles. I want the title to say it all. So you see a book with the title "Up is Not the Only Way." Oh, got it. Or "Love 'Em or Lose 'Em." Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what I try to do.
But it's wonderful because it's memorable, and we remember things that are simple. We never remember things that are super complicated. So the simplicity is really the magic, because that's what's going to stand out. And I think, so I have not read Up is Not the Only Way, and I hear that, and I will, I promise. But I hear it and I immediately think that, to me, is really interesting, because I think, and this is my personal opinion, not everyone who listens or watches this has to agree, including yourself, but I think that we have a really crappy system in place when it comes to promotions and how people move through an organization in general. I think the way that we reward people is very flawed, and people end up in roles that they don't really want to be doing, with responsibility that they don't really want to have, that doesn't necessarily suit their skill set or mindset, but there's no other way to reward them, and so we just keep doing it this way.
So I wrote the first edition of Up is Not the Only Way in 1982.
Wow.
And I've been yelling it from mountaintops. And now I see people talking about internal talent mobility. And I want to say, duh, like, and we've got to change it. You're right. We've got to change it by the way we compensate.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And absolutely, I wrote an article on compensating for other than up
Yep.
also years ago. And that article got an award from the American Compensation Association, which I have no idea the details of compensation, but I didn't see anybody pick up on it.
Which
Maybe
is
now, maybe now.
I mean, I do think there are more companies picking up on that idea now. I think a lot of it's coming from tech, where they're saying, I mean, selfishly, but I think they're seeing people who are, like, let's say, really phenomenal programmers that they want to retain, and so rather than saying now you have to manage other programmers, and they're like, that sounds like hell, I don't want that. They're able to provide them more compensation, more flexibility, and I think that's where I see it happening, not only but more than anywhere else, is situations like that.
Tech
But but
big.
Right, but it makes me hopeful because that model does work, and it's you retain people better, people excel. It's not like you're paying more money for, I mean, you're keeping the people that know
Right,
what you're doing there. It
right,
makes me hopeful that we'll see more of this outside of tech and outside of programming type jobs. I just pick on the really technical jobs because that's where I see it the most. I'm not saying it's the truth, but because I think there's a huge opportunity in general to really empower and enable people to be doing something that they're great at and they love, and keep them, keep them in the organization that they want to be at.
right, right. And I'll put in a plug, that the book Love 'Em or Lose 'Em. We've been teaching for 20 years globally, and now the sixth edition came out, and I'm working with a colleague to make the training, the education, uh, work for IT people,
I
tech
love
people.
that.
And so we're totally saying this is not just for anybody, this is for you. And I have an IT colleague who's helping us do that. And it dawned on me I should look at vertical markets for that. Healthcare.
Yeah.
Oh my heavens, is there ever a crisis in healthcare?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely.
Absolutely. um I'm going to ask this question since you brought it up. Is there the training that you're talking about, is there some place that anyone who's watching or listening can go to learn more about those offerings that you have?
Right. Come to bevk.com. That easy. Send an email,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to connect them.
And we will have all that information in the
Good.
show notes, obviously. But since you were just talking about it, if someone is like, "Oh, I'd be really interested in that training," I thought, well, what a perfect place to say bevk.com is where that would go. Bev, I feel like I could talk to you for the next 6 hours. You are lovely, and the work that you're doing is, I I mean, fascinating, and obviously I get very excited about these topics. But before we wrap up, I want to ask you, is there anything that you want to emphasize or add that we didn't get to that you think would be really important to wrap this up?
You know, one tiny idea is, if you want to keep people, if you want to keep good people and grow them, take note, notice what they enjoy and what they don't. And it's written on their faces
Hmm.
and in their behavior. Take note and ask. In somewhere I wrote an article that said it's all about recognize. Celine doesn't look very happy today. I wonder what's going on. Recognize, verbalize. Is it that report that's got you down? And then mobilize. It wasn't the report, it was mobilize, do something about it. So recognize, verbalize, mobilize. And I should make that my next book.
You should. But, and truthfully, you should, because I think a lot of people recognize, and leaders especially will recognize, they'll be like, oh, there's something up with Bev, or there's something up with that person. And they never get to the verbalize stage. And if that small percentage do, they never get beyond it because they're like, oh, well, I checked in, so everything's fine.
Right.
Right. So I actually think that's really valuable because I think the biggest gap, my experience, is between recognizing and verbalizing because they
I
don't,
think so too.
right? Like, how do you cross that, let alone mobilize? And,
Right, right.
you know,
So we'll write that book.
I'm in 100% in 100. I think that's really valuable. And I love that you've left that, that's kind of the thought that we're leaving people with, because if we can remember to recognize and verbalize and mobilize as leaders, that's a game changer for recognizing the people around us,
Right.
making them feel included and understood, and all those things that we want in the organizations that we're building today.
I'm reminding myself of it.
um,
Okay.
you are delightful, and I am so grateful for you for coming on my show and chatting with me. I'm going to encourage everyone to go read your books, buy your books, read your books. Love Them or Lose Them is 6th edition is out, which is incredible. Um, so so many important concepts, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful, and I wish you the very best of luck in the rest of this half pandemic year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today on the Leading Through Crisis podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a minute to rate and review us on your podcast app. If you're interested in learning more about any of our guests, you can find us online at www.leadingthroughcrisis.ca.